He didn't own much, just a small restaurant on a quiet corner of town, the kind most people passed by without noticing. But to him, that little place was everything. It was his dream, his proof that hard work could lead to something good, even for a black man in a world that often told. One cold evening, he saw an old homeless man shivering near the trash bins behind his restaurant. Most people would have looked away. He didn't. He brought the man inside and gave him food, warmth, and dignity. What he didn't know was that a single act of kindness would trigger a chain of events that would test his faith, his business, and the very way people saw him. Because in a world where color still defines worth, compassion can become controversy, and generosity can cost you. 4 years, Marcus believed his restaurant, the Golden Spoon, was more than just a business. It was his way of giving back, a small light in a neighborhood that had seen too much struggle and too little hope. Every day, he arrived before sunrise, sleeves rolled up, apron tied tight, ready to cook with heart and humility. He treated every customer like. The next morning, Marcus arrived to find something strange. A police car was parked out front. 2 officers are standing by the door. He thought maybe there'd been a break-in, but the truth was worse. They said his business was under investigation. Health violations, they claimed. Within days, word spread. The restaurant was temporarily shut down pending review. Neighbors whispered, reporters called. Online, comments appeared, some supportive, others cruel. Why is he feeding homeless people? It's unsanitary. Maybe if he kept his place cleaner, the same community that once praised him now turned its back. Marcus tried to stay calm, tried to believe truth would win out. But the silence of those he'd fed before, the ones who'd smiled at his table, cut the deepest. Walter showed up one morning, shivering again. He said he'd heard what happened and felt responsible. But Marcus shook his head. You didn't do anything wrong, he said. You were hungry. That's not a crime. Yet deep down, he knew this wasn't just about a meal. It was about how easily a man's kindness could be twisted when his skin didn't fit the story people wanted to believe. As weeks passed, Marcus fought to clear his name. Letters, appeals, meetings with officials, every step met with resistance. But one night, something happened that changed everything. He had gone back to the restaurant to grab a few things, the place dark and cold, the smell of stale cooking oil still hanging in the air. As he stood there, he heard footsteps outside, slow and heavy. Then, a voice. It was Walter. But he wasn't alone. A small crowd had gathered behind him. Strangers. Some carried signs. Others held candles. They had come because they'd seen something. Someone had filmed that night, the night Marcus fed Walter. The video was now everywhere. Marcus stood frozen as Walter spoke to the crowd, his voice trembling. This man fed me when no one else would, he said. He didn't see a beggar, he saw a human. But as the attention grew, so did the pressure. Some people still refused to see the heart behind his actions. They called it a stunt, a setup. Others said he did it for fame. Marcus didn't respond. He just watched as the world decided what kind. That night, as the crowd stood in silence and Walter's voice echoed through the cold air, Marcus realized this was bigger than him. Bigger than a restaurant. This was about every black man who'd ever had to prove his humanity before being believed. Every act of good is questioned. Every smile doubted. Every dream dismissed. The world was finally watching, but would it understand? By the next morning, the video had already spread like wildfire. A bystander had recorded it, Walter handing Marcus that small brown bag, his voice shaking as he said, "You fed me when no one else would." No editing, no spin, just 2 men, one act of kindness returned in a world that had tried to destroy it. Within hours, the clip was everywhere. Major networks replayed it with captions like "Compassion comes full circle." Online, people who once judged him began to ask questions. Why was a man punished for feeding the hungry? Why does kindness? The same crowd that once condemned him now flooded his page with apologies and donations. But for Marcus, it wasn't about money. It was about truth finally cutting through the noise. City officials backtracked. The violations were quietly cleared, and the closure order lifted. Yet Marcus didn't reopen right away. He stood in the empty restaurant, sunlight streaming through the windows, the smell of dust and memory in the air. He realized the real damage wasn't on the walls or the counters, it was in the hearts of people who saw his color before his character. When he finally reopened, he didn't advertise. He didn't post. He simply turned the key, switched on the lights, and began cooking again. Slowly, the community returned. Some came with guilt, others with gratitude, but all left changed. And sitting by the window, as always, was Walter, smiling faintly, as if reminding Marcus that even in brokenness, there's beauty. But the story didn't end there. Marcus's video became a spark, shared by activists, pastors, and teachers, anyone who had ever felt the sting of being judged for their skin. It wasn't just about a restaurant anymore. It was about what happens when compassion meets prejudice head-on and refuses to bow. In interviews that followed, Marcus didn't talk about hate or revenge. He talked about love, the hard kind. The kind that stands tall even when the world kneels on your spirit. He said, "If kindness costs you your peace, then maybe the world's the one that's bankrupt." His words resonated far beyond his small town. Because his story wasn't just his. It was the story of every black man or woman who's ever had to prove their humanity before being believed. Every act of good is questioned. Every smile doubted. Every dream measured against someone else's prejudice. And though he couldn't erase what happened, Marcus understood something vital: silence protects no one, but truth, spoken or shown, can move mountains. The restaurant became more than a business again. It became a place of healing, a symbol of quiet defiance in the face of hate. And sometimes, when new customers walked in, they'd stop by the window where Walter sat and ask about the story. Marcus would simply say, "It wasn't about a meal. It was about seeing someone as human." He'd smile, serve another plate, and keep moving forward, because that's what resilience looks like. And maybe that's what America still needs to learn. Because the question isn't whether racism exists, we know it does. The question is, how many acts of kindness will it take before compassion stops needing an explanation? If this story moved you, don't just scroll away, share it. Someone out there needs to hear it. Tell me in the comments, do you believe one act of kindness can still change the world? Like, subscribe, and hit the bell if you believe in stories that reveal the truth and restore our humanity, one story